Welcome to our share on Torah Anytime. We are up to Perek Zayin, which, as we discussed yesterday, both Perek Vav and Perek Zayin are exceedingly difficult pirakim. To be very honest, if I could, I would just skip it. But being that life is going through difficult pirakim as well, and we don't understand everything, we just have to go through it anyway. So, so we were discussing that he built the Beis HaMikdash, and now we're going to describe how Shlomo Melech built for himself a palace. And the Beis HaMikdash took 7 years to build, but his own palace took 13 years. Now, some of Chazal, it's like just like, Noach was yesh dosh noshel l'shvach, v'yesh dosh oisel l'gnai. Some say that he spent only 7 years on the Beis HaMikdash, and then he goes and he spends 13 years on his own house. But Rashi understands it that it was the opposite, that on the Beis HaMikdash he worked very, very fast, so he got it done in 7 years. But on his own palace, it took his time, so it took 13 years. It slept. Anyway, Vayichalas kol Beis, he finished his house. Vayiven as Beis Yar Halavonoin Mea Ama Orkoi V'Chamishim Ama Yirachvoi V'Shloishim Ama Koi Mosoi Al Arba Turei Amudei Arazim Mechrusois Arazim Alu Amudam.
That's your question.
So he built this house in the forest of Lebanon. Now this house in the forest of Lebanon, Beis Yar Halavonoin, it seems to be that it was like a summer home. That's what it seems like. And it was made from wood, and it was made in the middle of the forest. And that's why it was called, it was in a forest near Yerushalayim, and it was called the Forest of Lebanon. And I guess it was because there was a lot of cedar trees, that's why it was called from the Forest of Lebanon. So he built the house of the Forest of Lebanon, and it was 100 amos long, which is longer than the Beis HaMikdash, wider than the Beis HaMikdash, and it was 30 cubics high. So the sufon, so it seems like there was beams. There was four rows of beams within the house. That means like this: that when you're going to build a building that's 100 amos, 50 amos, you have to understand that you have to be able to have beams going across 50 amos. Now imagine that 50 amos, the width is, let's say, 100 feet approximately. You don't have cedar trees that are 100 feet. How are you going to cover the span? And the answer is that they made beams in between. So there was 4 beams. There was 2 rows of beams on the sides of the walls, and then there was 2 in the center. So you divided up this 50 feet into, 16 feet or something or 16 amos, I'm sorry. Not 16 feet, 16 amos. So basically that's how you had the spans covered, that you were able to put supporting beams on the top. And then you were able to put the beams the other way. So that's basically, they have a sufon bo'erez mimal al atzlois. It was covered with cedar above. Now what tzlois mean is complicated. Either tzlois means the walls, or it means the ribs, or it means like supporting beams. Asher alu amudum arboim v'chamisha osar hatur. It was covered with cedar above, on top of the paddles that were on the columns. 15 in a row. So there was 45 panels. And again, if you look into the Mefarshim, there's every type of configuration you can try to think the way it means. There's somebody who says that's the way it was. So you just read the words. Sometimes you have to go into the zone where we're going to read the words. There's 3 rows of lookout windows, one facing another 3 times. Here, I'm just going to show you all the different, so that you should see all the different, you should just see all the different shittas. You can see it? Yeah. Right, that's one way. All different configurations of how the beams were situated, how the supporting beams, like how they put the floors on top, how are the beams made in between the beams? How were the beams made? Was it like a main beam with beams on top of it, or was it like a tic-tac design? You see, anyway, even the windows, like there was 3 rows of windows. How are the 3 rows of windows situated? I remember once that it says in Chassidus, it talks about it, that every single word of the Torah is a Shem. Every single word in the Torah is a name of Hashem. It's a way how to connect to Hashem. Why do you need to say that every word in the Torah is the name of Hashem? You know, when you read the Torah and you understand what it says, then you understand what it says. And the secret is that sometimes you don't understand what it says, and you have to know that just saying those words, it has multiple meanings, many layers of meanings, and sometimes it's designed in a way that you should walk out confused and say, hey, there's so many layers of meanings, I can't even choose one of them. That's the house of Shlomo HaMelech. The palace of Shlomo HaMelech was a place that had many layers and levels of meanings and ways to comprehend and understand what the message of it was, and why we're describing in the Navi in such great detail. You have to understand, we don't even describe over here his main palace. We don't talk about Shlomo HaMelech's main palace. We don't even know anything about his main palace.
I was going to ask you, where do you live in tonight? You live by David's palace?
It could be, probably. Beis David, probably. But we're describing here a summer own palace of Shlomo HaMelech, which was bigger than the Beis HaMikdash. And it's in great detail that we're describing how the summer palace of King Shlomo, and just the amount of ways to understand the configurations of it is just, it's like we learned a few parakim ago that Shlomo HaMelech used to say 3,000 mashal, 3,000 parables or metaphors to help them to comprehend it. So it seems like that's the way we're describing v'chol apchas apsachim v'amezuzos revuyim shokef umil merza shalish pa'amim. All of the doorways and doorposts were 4-sided, one facing opposite the other 3 times. It seems to mean that the windows in the front and the back were like facing each other. This makes it even more complicated, because after we're describing the building, we're saying, by the way, in front of the building there was another building. So it seems like this was a building in front of a building. Probably it means like a hall where you come in order to go into the main chamber. So this is what we're describing now, which is the room in front of the big room. And then it's describing another room. He made another room, which was the throne room where he would judge. Which is the throne room. He covered it from cedar, from the foundation to the foundation. Now again, where are these two rooms that he's describing? I don't know. And here we're saying we're describing something else. It seems like and the house that he lived in had a separate courtyard, further in from the antechamber, and another house he built for the Bas Parai, which was his wife. It was also built the same way. So where's this room and where's that room and how is it coordinated? But the point is that he built a separate house for the Bas Parai. Now, how he was able to marry a Bas Parai, it's complicated. The Pashtus, he was Megayer. If he actually lived with her or not is another whole conversation. Why he married the Bas Parai? And Pasuk Pshat seems like that he wanted to have good relations with all the people around, all the powers to be that were in those times, and Egypt was a major power, economic power, and therefore when he married Bas Parai, it means that he was in an alliance with the neighboring rulers, and that was what gave him his power, that he shouldn't have any rivals or enemies around him. But we're going to see later it wasn't so complicated with Bas Parai. Kol Eila Avonos Yikaros. All of these were of precious stones.
It wasn't complicated.
What was?
Marry her.
Everything was complicated. Everything about Shlomo HaMelech is complicated. He wrote a whole book saying that his life was complicated and that the simple way of living beats the complicated way of, like, you know, Koirach shipikeach hoyo maro l'shtuzeh. The Rabbinim said, Koirach shipikeach hoyo. Koirach was a wise man, a smart man. Maro l'shtuzeh. What did he see to this foolishness? To be a smart man. There's nothing more foolish than being a pikeach. Much better if you just say something, keep it simple, stupid. So everything about Shlomo Melech here is complicated. Kol el avonim yikaros. Just read Mishlei, read Kaheles, and you'll see. It's all complicated descriptions of how complicated it is to be complicated. Kol eila avonim yikaros kimidas gozes migareres. All of these were of precious stones, the dimensions of standard cut stones. It was sawed with a saw inside and out. From the foundation to the ceiling, from the outside to the great courtyard. The foundation was made of precious stones, great stones, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits, which is 10 amos by and 8 amos, which is humongous stones. There was precious stones, kimidas, gozes, va'eres, the dimensions of standard cut stones and cedar. Now, what the size of these stones are and how these stones were positioned, we don't know. I always have this thing that whenever you learn things in the Torah, there's like different levels. Sometimes you'll read things and it's simple to understand, or there's a story and it's easy to mine it for the messages and connect it. Sometimes you learn halachas in the Torah, which says, you know, how things. Okay, that's already a bit more complex. And then sometimes you read these, either the names of people or the dimensions of things. Okay, the names of people are just plain boring. But whenever the Torah goes into dimensions and you're describing sizes and you're trying to Google translate it in your mind to what those dimensions mean in the modern world and how was it done, and we don't have any point of reference to understand it, and I spent over 2 hours trying to find diagrams online to figure out the dimensions, how it's built, and I found 6 different shittas, and I couldn't get it. And I always come back to the same idea that this is built into the Torah, that certain parts in your life are going to look like this. This is what it's going to look like. This is a description of parts of living. We have to know that we do not comprehend everything, and there's certain parts where it gets complicated, and we try to figure it out, and we think maybe we figured it out, but then you see there's other opinions that say you didn't figure it out, and that's also part of the Torah. I think that's the deepest message of all messages. The great courtyard all around was of 3 rows of cut stone and a row of cut cedar. So it was the inner courtyard of the house of Hashem and the antechamber of the house. So Shlomo Melech went and he took Chiron. Chiron, now we shouldn't confuse Chiron from the king of Chiron, because we just mentioned it was the same name. It seems like Chiron was a popular name. It was just like a name that was used a lot. And he took Chiron from Tzoir. He was Ben Ish Almana. He was the son of a widow. Humimate Naftali. He came from the tribe of Naftali. Va'av of Ish Tzoiri. His father lived in Tzoir. He was a chodesh. He was a coppersmith. Chodesh nechoshes v'yamole es chochma v'es hatvuna v'es hadas. And Hashem filled him with chochma, tvuna, and das. It's like chochma, bina, and das. Last is kol malachim and choshes. To have the knowledge of how to do work with copper. V'yavi al HaMelech Shlomo v'yaz es kol malachta. He did the entire work. Now you have to understand that it's very similar, this description, to when we're talking about Betzalel. When it talks about in the Torah Betzalel, it's very similar to the description that in order to be an artisan in the work of Melechas Beis Hashem, you have to be fulfilled with Chochma, Bina, and Das. Now, Chochma, Bina, and Das are 3 stages of how something is created. Chochma is when you have like this burst of inspiration, like wow. Bina is to be Maven Davar Mitoich Davar, and Das is when you actually bring it and you complete it into this world. It's like in Chassidus, it always describes like the process of a child being born. That Chachma is the initial burst of inspiration, where it's the Zera. Bina is when it's Tisha Yarche Leido, that the mother's womb is taking the seed and expanding it and doubling it and creating it into and forming it into what it's going to be. And das is once the child is born, then it's das. And the Chachma went through the Bina process and came into being. The same concept is within your mind. Whenever you want to create, there's a burst of creativity. It means you have a burst of an idea. It's like it says in Tanya, Kebara Kamavirik, like you're in a dark room and a lighting comes down from heaven and then suddenly it lights it up and wow! But then you have to actually go through the process of creating it in this world. That means the fact that you saw something in a vision or you had a concept of something still has to go through a very hard, difficult period of where you process it and figure it out on the dimensions and on the limits of this universe of how to actually form it. And then when it actually comes out in a real Metzias, then it's das. Probably in the world of artists of like, being mamshech and niggin, or being a song, it probably goes through the same chokhmah bina das process. That is like a boom, and then you have to, find the right note and bring it down, and then you forget it, then you have to bring it back, and it doesn't come out exactly. And when it actually comes out, and it's actually, on a file that can be sent out, then and somebody could actually download it and listen to it. Then it came to the das. So Chidam had that unique ability to be an artist, which had the Chachma Bina Das. That means there's a lot of artists that get stuck in Chachma. Many, many more get stuck in Bina. Very few actually are able to bring it down from Chachma Bina Das. So Betzalel in the Torah and Chiram had this ability that they were that he was able to bring it in Tasiyah. That's the Chiddush. That he was able to be all the way down. So vayotzar shnei amudim nechosh shmoina esrei amo koimas amud echad v'chut shterem esrei amo Yosef es amud hasheni. So he built these two pillars that were called the Yochanu Boyaz. Now I was very confused. That was these two pillars. Is he describing here that he built these two pillars in his own palace, or that he built it in his palace and he also built it in the Beis Hamikdash from Shlomo HaMelech Beis Hamikdash? It seems like both Shlomo HaMelech's palace and the Beis Hamikdash had these two pillars built in front of them. I wasn't clear, but for sure in front of the Beis Hamikdash there was a Yochanan Boaz. So they were 18 cubits high, or 18 amas high, and the circumference was 12, which means if you do pi, it would end up that it was like 4. It was 4 amas wide. So you're talking about a beam, which if you would go through the center would be like about 8 feet wide. So you're talking about a massive pillar going up like. If you're talking about 18 cubics and you're saying that you're talking about like, I don't know, almost 38 feet. You're talking about humongous high pillar. Now these pillars were made from copper, which obviously you had to process the copper and then form it. Now here we're going to go into great intricate details of how the top of this pillar was created. He made 2 crowns to put on the top of the columns. So there's these huge pillars, and on top there's this ball on top. Now, how this ball was placed on top of the pillar, so there's 2 shittas. Here, I'll just show you like a picture. One is that the ball had like a notch on the ball, and then it was placed on top of the pillar, or the bottom of the ball had like a protrusion coming in and it was placed inside of the pillar. But regardless of how it was, this ball was placed on top, this huge copper ball. Now the design of this ball on top of the pillars was shvache maseh shvacha gedile maseh shasherois lekasoros asher al roishu amudim shiva lekaseres echad shiva lekaseres hashenis. Okay, I'm just going to read the words, just to understand one word. Networks of fronds. I'm sure everybody knows what fronds are. Strings made like chains for the crowns that were on tops of the columns. 7 for the one crown and 7 for the second crown. So bottom line is there's chains hanging down from this copper pillar. Just reminding me a story that when the Rebbe Rayatz, the Yosef Yitzchok, he was once, I don't know where, somewhere, and it was in a hotel, and somebody asked him, what's the message of Chassidus? He told him, what was Chassidus Mechadish? Everything that it says in Chassidus, it says already in the Torah. To the contrary, Chassidus can't come and create something new. You're not allowed to come up with a new innovation in the Torah and say, hey, I'm going to add something. We don't have a New Testament. We have we just have one Testament. We just have one Testament, and we find everything inside of that. So, what was Chassidus? What innovation did it bring? So as they were talking, the Rebbe Yat was outside this hotel, or this magnificent, or this big, these old buildings, these 1800 buildings, and in front was these huge pillars. And in the middle of the conversation, the Rebbe Yat pointed. He said, "Look over there! Look! He said, "You see those pillars on the top? You see those pillars? What's on top?" The guy looks up on the pillars and he sees there's this bouquet of flowers on top of the pillar. And he asks him, "And what?" He said, "What do you say to that flower all the way there on the top? You see that flower?" He says, "Wow, it's huge. Wow. It's really, if you think about it and you observe it, then you see the intricate details of that bouquet of flower on the top. It's like, wow." And the Rebbe asked him, "Tell me, did you notice it before?" "No." "Why not?" "Why not?" "Because it's all the way up there. It's not like I go around looking on the top of buildings to see." So he said, Chassidus is pointing out the rows on the top. Which means, I'll say it in different terms, the way how I understand the story was that Chassidus is a highlighter. Chassidus is a highlighter. That means you have everything in the Torah, but in different generations, different Chachmei Yisrael highlight different points, and they say, Rabotai, highlight means zone into this nikudah. This is where the focus has to be for this generation, for you now. That's the art. So, I just remember the story when we were reading here, descriptions of the top of a beam, what was on the intricate details on the top, because when you went to the palace of Shlomo, you know what the wisdom was? Can you see the detail on the top of the beam? Can you go into the Beis Hamikdash? Do you see that? Do you see that chain over there with that pomegranate hanging down 40 feet high up on the top? That's where it clicks. That's where you connect. So that's the Shchava Maseh, Shchava Gedilim, and all the intricate details of these strings with pomegranates hanging. Vayasas amudim ushnei tudim sovev al hashchvacha ve'echos lechasos as a kasoris shal rosh harimonim v'chinas lechasos hashenis. He made the columns, and then he made a network. He made from copper. He wove an entire like a cloth on top that was on top of, to cover the crowns that were on the top of the pomegranates, and he did the same to the second crown. And the crowns that were on top of the columns, he made flowers on the top of it. It's all details that's on top of the ball, which is on top of the pillar. And they were also crowns above on the two columns, opposite on the belly that was on the side of the network, and 200 pomegranates in rows all around on the second crown. 200 pomegranates. 200 copper pomegranates, which each one had this design. So one of these pillars was called Yochaz, and one was called Boyaz. So Yochin and Boyaz, it means, Yochin means to prepare. Boyaz means here is the oils, here is the splendor, here is the oils and the strength. So these two pillars, it was like when you walked through these two pillars, you were knowing, I am preparing to walk into the space where Boyaz, where here is the glory and here is the splendor. And one more pasuk we'll finish today. Actually, two more pasukim. Sure. On top of it was these flowers, and thus the work of the columns was completed.